to the gender relationship between men and women, as we call it or related to the women question, but it's also central to the way of which we understand how feminism is defined in the first place, and how knowledge is produced, not only in the field of feminism, but in the field of other studies, as it comes out in the discussions in the previous days. And then it is feminism. Usually, because there is a kind of what I can call a popular discourse about feminism, which is usually here existed in the Muslim world, in the Arab world. Like, whenever you hear the word feminism, it is always connected with free sex, abortion, and anti-religion, anti-religious, and all those, I can say, negative connotations, or the connotations which are not opposed to our religion and to our culture. And not only that, but most of the literature about feminism, which is written by Muslim scholars in the Muslim countries, they always just took one part of feminism, this part which talk about the freedom talks about the freedom of sex and lesbians and all those kinds of issues, and depict it as if this is all what feminism is about. And I don't know if this is the reason for that, is that because people are not aware of other strands of feminism, or it is coming as part of the whole issues around we versus them, we Muslim versus the West. So it is an attempt to let us protect our women and protect our culture and protect our religion from such ideas. That is why feminism is predicted this way. So whatever the explanation, I think for me, it is unfair. So now we'll move to what is difference, or the conceptualization of difference, at least as far as I know. So on one hand, we have people who difference is conceptualized in feminist literature when the first comes up as a difference between man and woman, and then after it comes to be conceptualized among different women groups. In both cases, difference is like stressing heterogeneity as opposed to homogeneity. So we have different conceptualizations of difference. We have essentializing difference. That means you essentialize your difference based on your identity, whether it is on race or religion or class, and this led to homogenizing projects, which is called identity based on identity politics, which at the end resulted in excluding of many others. And the second thing is the denial of difference. That means, and here mainly in feminist literature, I'm referring to ideas of global sisterhood, which assume the sameness of oppression, and which is based on ethnocentric, Western-wide European understanding of what feminism is. And it has been interrogated and it has been criticized by women from the third world, by African women, by Muslim women, by black women, all over. And I'm going to say more about that because it is based on the understanding, ethnocentric understanding of the nature of womanhood. And then we have overemphasizing of difference. And this is mainly related to the conceptualization of the postmodernists of difference, which overemphasizing difference and like fragmented even the concepts fragmented led to kind of fragmented knowledge about what is gender, what is race, and all those lens, ethnicity, and religion. all those lenses of difference on one hand, and there is no meta-narrative, there is no grand theory, there is no center. So we end up just celebrating our differences, but without objective. What is the objective behind? This is on one hand, and on the other hand, it also ignores or gloss over the power structures underlying these differences. Why differences? Why some of differences have more value over the other in different times and different places. So this way of understanding difference also is not helpful. So there should be another way of thinking about difference, and we need to think of that. Now we move to difference and feminism. As we said, there are many feminists across the world, whether in Africa or in Arab or in the Muslim world, and even in the global north, who are against this idea of global sisterhood, and that against this idea of sameness of oppression. And if the feminist methodology is based on women's experiences or analyzing women's experiences, then for sure women's experiences are different across different parts of the world. So we need to accept this idea. So we have many groups which come up starting in the 70s. We have the black feminists, and they were the first who criticized this ethnocentric idea of sameness of oppression of all women, and they call it white supremacy. And they think that it is very unfair, it is problematic, not only in understanding the reason for the women white, but it's also problematic because it sets the agenda for a struggle. And for them, for example, if for the white Western feminists, abortion comes at the top of the agenda. For them, as black feminists, this is not at the top of the agenda. Because they are talking about that they are oppressed not only because of being women, but also working on both, on women and on men, both of them. And then lately, in the 90s, come the Muslim feminists. So they are, their main concept is that as per Islam, as per the higher objective of Islam, as per the spirit of Islam, women are given rights which are not different, like in terms of humanity, not different from men. But what happened is that because of the interpretation of the scriptural resources, Quran or Hadith, and because of the culture of the ulama, the fuqaha, some of the fuqaha, this interpretation set the ground for discriminative relationship between men and women in Islam. So, and actually the way I see it, that those, and by the way, they are different. We're not one, even when I'm talking about Muslim feminists, I'm not talking about one group. They are different groups. Some of them took the path of interpreting the scriptural resources, and some of them embark on new understandings for the concepts of equality and freedom from Islamic point of view. So again, we are not talking about the same group here. And the way I see it is that those Muslim feminists actually they are under attack from both sides, whether from some of the scholars in the Islamic world, and also from the feminists, some of the Western feminists, because they can hardly imagine that religion and feminism can go together. And again, whatever I think they are, whatever we think about them or how they can get support in going on the right direction, they are working against the passive image of women, of Muslim women. So let us now see how feminists how they think about difference. And this is very important, and it will come also to some of the discussions which we had in the previously. And so for them, it is all the factors of difference, whether it's based on race or on class or on ethnicity. These factors articulate and intersect to create differences, or to create difference as an element of oppression in women's lives. And it is important to understand, to go beyond intersectionality and how these forces, or how these elements of difference intersect and articulate, to investigate the power structures behind each of them. Why some of these differences have more value than the others? Why? Why is in some places women are oppressed because of their race, and in some places they are oppressed because of their religion, and so in some places because of their race? So we must go beyond to see what is underlying the power structure which is underlying these differences, and create them as forces of oppression and subordination. And in order to do that, we need to understand difference. Again, back to the concept of difference. We need to understand the dynamism of difference, because difference, these elements, if I look at them, they are not stagnant. They are changing by time. And we need to understand the fluidity of difference, because not all the time they have the same value. And we need to see the relational between them, the relationship between them. So sometimes you may find someone who is oppressed because of their race, but they are not oppressed. They are highly educated. They are not oppressed because of their class. So what are we talking about here? So we have to understand the powers which turns these factors of differences into structures of oppression in the first place. And this is of special importance, like understanding differences is special importance because of all those factors of globalization and the complexities of transnationalism, and the way we see difference has been conceptualized in very negative terms, if I can say, or sometimes in competitive terms, if I can say, that I am better than you. And the way, if we look at difference in this competitive way of thinking, then this will for sure create so many problems. So how feminists view going beyond difference? What did they say? So we'll say, I will give just few examples, and you will see how this is related to the previous discussions which we have. So I'm having Mohanty here from third world countries. So she said, diversity and difference are central values to be acknowledged and respected. And I'm giving also example from Naples. She's a black feminist. So she said, we need to go beyond the politics, what she called the politics of naming. So whether you are naming yourself a feminist or activist, or an Africana or womanist, or Muslim feminist, or black feminist, what is the objective? At the end, what do we want to achieve? We need to look at what we want to achieve at the end. And then Al-Ali, who is coming from, she's from Iraqi origin. So, and in this part of the world, of course, we have this relationship of we versus them, we, the Muslims, and the West. So that is why she's calling for going beyond these polarities of we versus them, and the secular, and the versus the Muslims. And also we have Badran here as an example of Muslim feminist. So she said that feminism belongs to all. And then we have Marina Lazhar, also from Algeria, I think, that we need to go to see what is human at the heart of womanhood across cultures and race. And there are a lot of examples I am having in this regard about other feminists who are also stressing that we need we don't need to reduce the feminine, the woman self only to gender. We need to look beyond this. We need to look how it is related to other factors, not only gender. So some of them, of course, believe that feminism is like a liberatory ideology. So we need to have the share from different groups. And some also calls for the idea of what Ramon talked about, universal. They called for universal feminism. So we find like there are different, some called for locational feminism to consider the local when talking about feminism in the local circumstances. What will come from all this discussion is what I think important, essential, is what is Muslim thought in regard to difference and diversity. Because this is essential. How we conceptualize difference and diversity, it is the cornerstone in understanding feminism or defining feminism. And also, what we want to achieve, how we define feminism and what we want to achieve. What is our ultimate end? What is our ultimate objective? It is important because it determines how we define feminism is also important. And the last question is how can we maintain and consider the local context as a side of knowledge production. And here, when I'm stressing the local context, I am talking about our local context, which is religion, which is culture, and which is the way we understand religion and the way we understand Quran, and as Dr. Tariq was saying, our relationship to the center, and this is important. So that's it from my side, and I just want to give the opportunity to Chauki, because he always say I am the feminist part in the center, and he is the Salafist part. So I would like to see what the Salafists will say in regard to these questions. Thank you. And yeah, one more slide before Chauki starts. It's also part of my question, and this is the one. So I don't want you to look at it in terms that she is wearing a short skirt or she's not wearing hijab, or maybe she should wear niqab, and got into this, endless discussion, but though it's important, but what I am referring to here is that women are jumping over the fences. So it's a metaphor. So what are these fences? And how women are jumping over it? And where are they reaching? So this is it from my side. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So like you understood, I'm here for matriarchal reasons that were imposed on me. So that's why actually I didn't really prepare for you a PowerPoint, and I tried to bring some ideas together on several papers. So I'm not sure if I will be able to give you something that is structured, but I will try, inshallah. So first of all, let's see. Yes. First of all, Number one. First of all, I wanted just to go back to what we already talked about today, and that is these readings that are in disfavor of the woman that we can find in the Islamic traditions. And I think when Islam came, the reality, like I describe it, was a patriarchal reality. What means that the perception towards women, the perceptions were negative towards women. The practices and the cultures that were dealing with women were also negative. So this is what I call the patriarchal reality. And it is in this reality that revelation came. And revelation came to deal with this reality, not only to adapt to it, but to change it gradually. Now, of course, after Islam, after the revelation stopped, the reality didn't change, because of course it's not that easy, and it is a process that was meant or supposed to continue after revelation, but this process didn't continue, and this is not only true in relation to the woman of to the question of woman, but in other questions, like we said also yesterday, slavery, and in other questions like political issues, like Dr. Shinqiti pointed out. All of these questions, the Islam came to challenge, to address them and to change the reality, but this process didn't continue because the weight of the reality was stronger than the efforts of the scholars to continue this process. In some aspects of the reality, the scholars were able to change the reality with their ijtihad, etc., and to reverse the situations. But here, so it means that this reality, some part of the Islamic reality was built on the Islamic principles. But so the conception and the practices were based on Islamic principles. But here, in the case of women and the case of slavery and political issues, it was the opposite. It was the Islamic intellectual productions that was based on the reality and not the reality that was based on the Islamic principles. So it was totally the opposite. And it's here where we can find what I call patriarchal readings. I call it patriarchal readings, and what I do mean by patriarchal reading is the readings that are not coming out of an subjective or objective reading of the texts throughout the methodology that is dealing with the nature of the text, but readings where the reality, where the conceptions, and where the notions, like notion of fitna, woman is a fitna, the notions and the conceptions and the practices are projected to the text. It's a projection. The reality was projected on the text. And this is where, in my understanding, this is where this patriarchal reading comes from. Because we have some perception on woman. We have the perception that woman was inferior, was there. But it remained. It remained, and so you find, actually I did look, and I didn't find one single, except of Turabi, one single scholar of tafsir, and Ibn Hazm, but he's not a mufassir, saying that woman is not inferior than man. I tried to look, and like I said, the only one from the traditional scholars that said that women were not inferior to man is Ibn Hazm. But all the mufassirin that are read by dealing with the verse الرجال قوامون على النساء were all claiming that man was superior than woman in everything, in his humanity, in his intelligence, in his on the spiritual level, on all the levels. And even the modern reformist scholars like Ibn Ashur and Rashid Rida, they say the same. So like I said, until now I read only one, and he's a modern scholar who didn't say this. So this is just to show you, and this patriarchal reading, you can find it everywhere. In the conception of woman, the existential conception of woman and her mission on earth and her sexual identity, to the ethical and legal rights, you can find this everywhere in the tradition, and especially in tafsir. And this is what I call the patriarchal reading, and I think we don't have to blame the scholars, because they were trying to be objective when reading the text, but sometimes the reality was heavier than their efforts to be subjective or objective. Now, coming back to the modern time, if I consider that the contemporary discourse and thought about man and woman in Islam is in a deadlock. The contemporary discourse is in a deadlock. Actually, what was needed is to to screen this matter in the tradition, to screen the tradition and to review the tradition and to review the text of Revelation, to refund the discourse and elevate the principles and values that frames the issues related to man and woman on a basis of a solid methodology. And this never happened, and this is where I consider that we can distinguish today three different tendencies in the Islamic thought dealing with the issue of man and woman. First tendency is a form of a new projection. It's no more the projection of historical patriarchy on the text, but it's the projection of modern conceptions on the text. So we went from one projection to another. And so the point here is just to find a way to project Western values on the text, or Western conceptions, or even feminist conception on the text, no matter how we will do it, how we will play with the text, or how we will reject the text even, or how we will find methodologies that are not respecting the nature of the text. No matter what, the point is to project. This is the first tendency. The second is a tendency that is defending the traditional readings of the text. This old, but what I call patriarchal readings, well, the point is just to keep them and to defend them, and this is the traditionalist approach. The third approach is an approach that is tended to glorify and to defend Islam and to try to find somehow an apologetic way to say, no, Islam karram al-mar'a, umman wa ukhtan wa bintan, etc. This is beautiful talk and beautiful slogans about women in Islam, but no going back to the tradition and going back to the text and give a ta'sil, give a rooted discourse and a comprehensive discourse on women in Islam. So we have all of these texts that can be understood wrong, but we don't deal with it. So for me, we have these three tendencies are there, and the tendency that is trying to develop an alternative discourse that is rooted in the tradition and that is comprehensive and giving an overall philosophy on women and men in Islam is, for me, a very marginalized tendency, and that is not having a lot of impact today or even existence. So just, how many time do I have? Okay. Okay, then I can give example of each one of these tendencies? Okay. Okay. Okay, I have 1 hour and a half, mashallah. So the first tendency, the modernists, so those who want to perform a new type of projection from the projection of the historical realities to the modern realities, well, actually they reject the tradition, but they reject not only the patriarchal readings of the tradition, but they reject even the methodology and everything that's coming from the tradition, even the methodological tools that we need to be able to have a right understanding of the text, they reject them. Why? Because these tools don't allow them to do their projections. It's not possible. Using the right methodology of approaching the text, linguistically and all of the other tools of methodology, will not enable them to do their projection, so they just reject everything. And they come up with a new approach that is not respecting the text, that is going against the nature of the text. We have the historical approach, saying that the text is historical. We have the utilitarian approach. Actually, the text comes with, we just have to take the al-muqaraba al-naf'iyya, the objective, and not the text itself. And we have other kinds of methodological elements that were developed by this approach. And what you hear and read in all their readings, it's the same that's coming back. Well, Islam allowed slavery and didn't forbid it, so it's the same thing. He allowed a man to marry 4 women, or a woman to have the half inheritance of the man. So, like we today, we agree that slavery is over, then we can agree also that those principles in the Quran are over. And this is based on a wrong understanding of the Quran and wrong understanding of the methodology, because the Quran and Islam never allowed slavery. And here we have to make the distinguish between al-hukm al-shar'i and al-ibaha al-asliya. For example, did Islam ever allowed alcohol? Islam never allowed alcohol. Alcohol was never a hukm shar'i. It was something that's coming from al-ibaha al-asliya, the original permission. The Islam came and it was there in society. And then, even the verse that say, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى حتى تعلموا ما تقولون. Oh, who do believe? Don't approach the prayer being in a state of drunkenness. Intoxication. Don't approach the prayer being in a state of intoxication until you know what you say. This prayer is not. This ayah is not allowing alcohol. Where is it in this ayah that alcohol is allowed? We can understand that you can't drink out of the prayer, but this permission is not an Islamic permission that is established by Islam. It's a permission that was there from the Jahiliyyah that Islam did not say anything about. So this is so we cannot speak about abrogation. This verse and other verses, alcohol was never abrogated in Islam because alcohol was never established by Islam. To talk about abrogation, there are several conditions. One of the conditions is that both principles, the one that is abrogated and the one that is abrogating, both are Islamic principles established by Islam. And if one of them is not an Islamic principle, not established by Islam, we can't talk about abrogation. Or else, everything is abrogation in Islam. Before, the prayer was not mandatory, and then Islam made the prayer mandatory. Does it mean that the non-mandatoriness of the prayer was abrogated by the fact that prayer was mandatory? No, because there was the fact that the prayer was not obligatory is not an Islamic principle. So here, for the slavery, Islam did not come and establish slavery as an Islamic principle. So how can we say then slavery was Islamic and now it's not non-Islamic because we decided to? Slavery was never Islamic. So now inheritance, that the woman inherit the half of the man. Is this Islamic? Yes. It's Islam who established this principle. So how can you say that now we come and we change this principle? Here we are talking about Islamic principle, and slavery we are not talking about Islamic principle. So this is coming back in this trend, this modernist trends, trying to play with the text without knowing the nature of Islamic sciences and the nature of the text, and then they come up with things like this. And then we have somebody like Nasr Hamid Abu Zayd saying, everything in the Quran is historical, even the Aqidah. Why did Allah talk about angels and hereafter, etc.? Because these Arabs, they had, some khurafat, some mythologies in their mind, and Quran needed to deal with this and to talk to them in their language. But now, alhamdulillah, we are educated. We don't need anymore to believe in angels and hereafter, etc. So everything is historical. This is how, from this point of slavery, and they come in and they make the whole text historical with the problem is that they don't understand the nature of the text, like I just explained about what is al-ibaha al-asliya and what is al-hukm al-shar'i, what is an Islamic principle, etc. So this is just one example about al-hadathiyun, and there are so many other examples. Al-taqlidiyun, the traditionalists, of course, for them the point is just to defend the classical readings because they don't have an alternative reading. And so, for example, for them, yes, woman is inferior than man because the Prophet ﷺ said in hadith muttafaqun alayh, Bukhari wa Muslim, النساء ناقصات دين وعقل. Woman lacks religion and intelligence. So they take this text and they take the traditional projections that were made on this text and perceptions on women, and they just say, what's wrong? The Prophet said it, so we just accept, and this is the traditional reading. And then we have the apologetic reading that is saying, like I said, nice slogans. Islam, women, mashallah, etc., everything is okay. And then dealing with the tradition, for example, I come back to the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, instead of doing a deep analysis with the methodology, etc., they say, the Prophet was laughing, kana yamzah. It was a joke. It was a joke. So they don't come up with new alternative reading, a new alternative discourse, and then the traditionals, they say, you know, you see how they play with the text, so we just stick to what we have, and so the three are feeding each other, actually. Now, from my humble perspective, what should we do? Just a humble opinion, that actually we are in need of a new alternative reading that is based on several things. I think the starting point is not, like some says, to deconstruct the traditional methodology, but it's the opposite. It's often because the traditional methodology was not respected that we came up with these patriarchal projections. And I give you one brief example, that is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ says, لا يحل لامرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر أن تسافر من غير ذي محرم. It's not allowed for a woman that believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment to travel without a mahram, without a tutor, or how do you call it? Bodyguard. So here, of course, some of the scholars used methodology of al-illa, etc., like the Malikiyya and the Shafi'iyya, saying actually here there is a illa, because هذا معقول المعنى, there is a raison d'être behind it, and that is the fact. And we have a hadith where somebody came to the Prophet and he was complaining about قطاع الطرق. How do you call them, Dr. Shinqiti? Highway robbery. And he was complaining about this, and the Prophet ﷺ says, do you know Al-Hira, this place in Iraq? He said, yes. He said, one day you will see women coming from Al-Hira to Mecca without fearing anyone but Allah. So here, when analyzing everything, we see that it's not ta'abbudi. It means that women are not allowed to travel without mahram just because, I don't know what, without reason to punish them. No, there is equality. So if there is this prescription, it means that there is something behind. So Al-Maliki or Shafi'iyya, they said, you know, she's allowed to travel if the way is secured, and if there is no danger, etc. But Al-Hanafiyya, he said, no, هذا من باب التعبد. Anyhow, she's not allowed, whatever. And Ibn al-Arabi al-Maliki, in his book, he commented on this, and he said, what's up with Al-Hanafiyya? He said, usually they are the first to use illah, and here they don't stick to their methodology. So you see, often these patriarchal readings are the fact of not implementing the methodology. So for me, the starting point is to implement the methodology. And you know, some of this Islamic feminist trend saying, no, we have to deconstruct the methodology, etc. But I went through their books to find one single example of a methodological principle that is creating patriarchal readings, and they don't come up with one single example. So where is the methodology that is creating patriarchal readings? So the starting point is not to deconstruct the methodology, but to implement the methodology. This is the first thing. The second thing, the methodology is incomplete, because I agree, the methodology is historical and objective at the same time. Historical because, you know, Shafi'i and other scholars, when they settled the methodological principles, they did it because of a historical context. But the principles in themselves, they are until a certain level, they are dealing with the nature of the text. So in themselves, they are not historical, because they are dealing with the nature, or trying to deal with the nature of the text. So here, the problem is that with the evolution and the development of the methodology, because of historical reasons, the methodology was not developed completely. So we need to complete the methodology to come out with a comprehensive overall methodology that is considering all the dimensions to deal with the text, and that is able to put the specific questions in its overall frame. So here we can talk about, first of all, we need to establish the general frame of reference through which we can deal with the questions related to man and woman in Islam. Second is to implement the traditional methodology. And third is to develop further the traditional methodology. Of course, I will not have time to speak about all of these points, but I will give you some hints on the first point, and that is dealing with the issues related to man and woman in its overall frame of reference. So this is the starting point, I think. So the overall frame of reference for dealing with questions related to man and woman, for me, this frame of reference is a pyramidal frame that has several levels. And for me, the highest level is Islamic worldview related to existence and human being and the purpose for which he was created. And we talked about some of these issues in the lecture on Khilafah. The second level is the higher purposes of Islam that Islam established in order to be able to perform this objective of Khilafah and in order to be able to address this overall frame. And the third level are the specific Islamic worldview related to issues related to man and woman. So this is the third level, and let us just give some elements about the third level, this overall Islamic frame through which we can deal with issues related to man and woman. So in a nutshell, one of the elements of this frame that will enable us to deal properly with questions on man and woman is the nature of man and woman, or the nature maybe of femininity and masculinity, etc. Well, so the Islamic view perception on this nature, and if we look back at the Quran, then we can say that the reality of man and woman and maybe femininity and masculinity is not the essence of human being. Human being in his essence, he's neither man or woman, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا. He created you from one essence. And then he created, or then he made out of it زَوْجَهَا. It's pair. So what we can understand here is that the human being transcends his sex. Human being transcends his sex, because initially the spirit from which human being was created is neither man or woman. So and actually man or the sex is related to the body, and the body and the woman or the human is in essence, he's human with his spirit and not with his body. And Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, الروح آلة البدن ومركبه. Spirit, yeah, this is the opposite, it's true. So the body is the tool of the spirit and is the ride of the spirit. Is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you on earth, your essence is in divine essence. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you on earth to perform the mission of Khilafah, and He gives you a tool, because this tool will enable you to address the reality. And actually even the human intelligence is way beyond his intellectual capacities that he has on earth, because the brain is just the tool that will make you manifest your intrinsic intelligence in this world. But human intelligence transcends the reality of the brain, and I talked about this, and in the hereafter we will understand and see things that we can't in this life. So the sex, male and female, are actually realities from this world, from the dunya. So it's and gender, femininity and masculinity, is a construction, not only social, but is a construction that comes out of the of three things actually, or we can say two things. الفطرة الجسدية, the physical fitra. Before the physical fitra, الفطرة الروحية, the spiritual fitra, that meets with the physical fitra and that meets with the dunya. This is out of which this construction of gender will come. So what can we, this is some elements of this first point of this general frame, and what can we learn from this? We can learn several things from this. The first thing that we can learn is the purpose for which both man and woman was created. And I don't believe that they have different functions on earth. They have one function, khilafah. So to generalize and to say they're different because each one of them, he has his function, this is a generalization that should not be made, because both of them has the same essence and were created to be khilafah. And if we read the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about al-amr ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar, and this is the main social function of the human being, and he is telling us that there is no difference between man and woman in this social function. So where is the social difference between man and woman? So we will speak about the differences, but we have to put them in the right measure and not to amplify them and make them differences in existence. No, there are differences in specific things, specific issues, and not difference in the role or the mission that each one of them has on earth. And actually, if we can come back to the lens of the Khilafah, excuse me, I always come back to the Khilafah, then I talked about three levels: the management of the inner world, the management of the society, and the management of the nature. Well, I relate here to the management of the society and to the difference of man and woman in relation to this, or to the role of man and woman in relation to this. They have to manage the society on the same level. Okay, it's true, they are different in some ways, and they will provide things that the other maybe will not provide in the management of society, but it's the same task. Then on the first level, the spiritual level, the management of the inner world, well, actually, and the sister referred to it before, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. So actually, and the Prophet ﷺ says that the one who marries, he completes the half of his religion. So it's actually the human being is in need of a second part to feel this inner rest. This inner rest, so this is something that will contribute to the management of your inner self, because you need the other in order to complete yourself and to feel this inner rest and to do this inner management. And you remember we referred, but we will go back later to this if we have time. This is one of the things that we can get out of this. We can get a lot of things out of it. The spiritual needs, if they have the same essence, then they have the same spiritual needs. So that means that this is something that can help us to understand text also. Because here, and I wrote a paper on this, on Salat al-Mar'a fi baytiha, together with my wife, because she is also interested in this issue. So we wrote a joint paper, and here we have a problem that the scholars say that the woman anyhow, she had to pray at home. But if we look at this and you look at the fact that they had the same spiritual needs, then actually it's a long issue, and I may refer you to this paper. So the spiritual, and also the fact that they're equal in humanity. Equal in humanity, what does it mean? It means that they will need the same. You know, Dr. Abdul-Majid Najjar, he has a very interested point in his book Maqasid Sharia, and he said one of the maqasid is hifd al-insaniyat al-insan, the preservation of the humanity of human. So the Sharia came with the same means to preserve the humanity of human that are and both man and woman are concerned. So this is also something an important thing to understand to deal with these issues. Now, so here, I don't think we have a lot of problems. Now, the biological differences. Is my time over? 2 minutes? So it's too problematic to address in 2 minutes. Okay, Allah yurifikum. Okay, I will do it briefly, inshallah, then. One of these essential elements of dealing with man and woman, and that should be also part of this overall frame in addressing these issues, is the perception, the Islamic perception on the differences, the biological differences between man and woman. First of all, what we know from Islam is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't do anything by mistake or by accident. خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق. He created the universe with the haqq, with the truth. So everything is following the truth and is submitted to the truth. And Allah nuru السماوات والأرض. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth, and everything is enlightened and guided by His light. So there is no accident in the universal realities. So everything that is in the universe is wanted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is a hikmah behind it. There is a divine will and a divine wisdom behind it. So, and this is what is known in the Islamic tradition by al-irada al-ilahiyya al-takwiniyya, the universal divine will. So the universal divine will, the scholars they talk about the universal divine will. So this is the will in His universe, and this is automatically guided to an-nur, to al-haqq, and submitted to Allah. And there is also al-irada al-ilahiyya al-tashri'iyya. This is the revelated divine will, and this came to address human being. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to each one of the male and female, and now we have to bear in mind that, like I said, we have to put these differences in the right place and don't amplify them. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them different in some biological aspects, well, that means that behind these differences there is a purpose, there is a divine will, and there is a divine wisdom. So the divine universal will contains purposes, maqasid, on the same level that the divine revelated will has maqasid, the divine created will has maqasid. Both of them has maqasid, and both of them has wisdoms. So the both wills, the revelated will and the universal will, are showing us that those differences are important, because in the universal will they are there. The only fact that they are there are showing us that they are important because Allah has created them. And the revelated universal will also is talking to us and telling us that those differences are important. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in the revelation, he talks about the differences and He calls them favors. And I don't disagree with the translation in the Quran that is saying preference. No, it's not preference, it's favor. And for example, Banu Israel وَفَضَّلَكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ, for me it's not He preferred Banu Israel on the others. No, He gave them favors that He didn't give to the others. And تِلْكَ الرُّسُلُ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ عَلَى بَعْض, the prophets, He didn't prefer one above the other. No, He gave one favors that He didn't give to the other. And here, man and woman also. It doesn't mean that He preferred one above the other, but He gave one favors that He didn't give to the other. And here what is important to understand is that Allah called this a favor. So this differences between man and woman is a divine favor. This is what Revelation is teaching us. So here, الوازع الطبيعي, so the divine universal will makes sure that a human being has, or before that, the Islamic teachings are showing us that it's important to have these differences between man and woman. But what we can see in Revelation is that Revelation didn't detail didn't detail this differences, what are they, and didn't come up with rulings or with teachings how these differences should be protected. Islam didn't do this. Why? Because this was something that was left not to the divine revelated will, but to the divine universal will. And here there is a famous قاعدة, and the scholar says الوازع الطبيعي مغن عن الإيجاب الشرعي. It means that if the natural stimulus is compensating the religious stimulus or the revelated stimulus. It means that if Allah put it something naturally in me, He will not come up with revelation with a lot of revelation to stimulate me, because I'm stimulated naturally. And I give you just a brief example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى, etc. He says, so worship Allah and don't take any others than Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and be good with the parents and those who are related, etc. And other verses he said the same thing. Another hadith he said the same thing, but never he talks about the children. Be good with your children. Why? Because the revealed divine will is not needed here, because there is the natural divine will. So you are stimulated naturally to be good with your children, so you don't have, it's not needed for the revelation to come to stimulate you, because the natural stimulus is already enough. So why I come back, how? No, I'm talking about this issue, and not always you are right. And this is why, humbly, I try to come out with a new rule, because it's true, some people, naturally in you will take care of your children without needing the revelation to tell you to do, whether you are religious or not. But some people, with their free will, excuse me? It should be the same case with parents. Yes, but it's not the case. It's not, it's more frequent to have people that will be disobedient to their parents, because the natural stimulus is less strong than the natural stimulus to be good with your children. And this is what we see even in reality, anyhow. So, I lost my point. So, anyhow, here I try humbly to come up with a new rule, because some people, with their free will, they can go against their natural stimulus and corrupt it, and then you have people that they can kill their own children or be wrong to their own children, to do wrong to their own children. So here I tried to figure out a new rule, humbly, that says, I wrote it down, إذا اختل الوازع الطبيعي وجب تعضيده بالواجع الشرعي. If the natural stimulus is disturbed, then we should enforce it with the religious stimulus. And what I mean with the religious stimulus is not only the halal and haram, but it's a very long issue, and I think that I took more than my time. Barakallahu fikum.
So we'll open the floor for discussion for 25 minutes, and then we'll break for a salah, 2 sharp, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Chauki, Jazakallah khair, it's a beautiful presentation, and my questions are for you. Yes, but because my questions are for you. All presentations are beautiful this week, so Jazakallah khair, all of you. But I would like to ask you for your personal interpretation or reading for the following 3. The first one is that marriage is half our deen. So what's your personal reading of that? Is it, religion? is it that religion here means my life purpose, or is it representing the commitment to my life purpose? How come that marriage is half of that? And the second thing is the ayah that talks about idribuhunna. If you can touch on that, if not, then later in the debate tonight. And the third thing is, you mentioned the hadith النساء ناقصات عقل ودين, and you said that you don't agree with the traditional interpretation of that. So if you could share your own, that would be great. Thank you.
These are three. Yes, these are three very important questions, and the response cannot be in few sentences. So I will try to be brief, but I can't be comprehensive in my response. The first one, it was about the marriage, and the marriage. I think I can't just say that it's only the spiritual aspect. I talked about the spiritual aspect in performing this khilafah, in managing your inner world, and this is essential. The marriage for this is essential because it will give you sakina. You are in need of your other half. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one, but his human beings are created in pairs. So they need each other to help each other to have this inner management, or to perform this inner management. This is one point, but this is not the only point. On the level of the society, the management of the human relation, I tackled one point, and that is the collective relation of al-amr al-ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar, that is dealing with all social issues, that's the general principle. But we have, for example, other things, and I give you just one brief thing, that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with his divine universal will, he put in each one of us the attraction to the opposite sex. And for me, maybe we can discuss with Dr. Fathi later, but for me, the purpose of marriage is not this to how do you say it, to
reproduce,
or
to preserve,
to have this satisfaction, this sexual satisfaction or whatever. Because for me, this attraction is a means. Allah put it in you, because I said that everything that Allah puts in you is needed, but it can corrupt you. But it's needed for you to be a Khalifa. For me, it's a mean that is needed to get you somewhere, and to get you in this union. Because without this, a human being will just not marry. And if Allah would have related this with his divine revelated will, then only the religious people would have married out of religious stimulus, but he didn't leave this to the religious stimulus. He left this to the natural stimulus. So everybody is driven by this. But the religious stimulus came to frame this relationship. So the universal stimulus came to get you there, and the religious stimulus came to frame this. And this is why zina, or one of the reasons that zina is haram, because Allah put this attraction in you, and then it don't get you to this frame. It gets you somewhere else. It means that you can how do you say this? You can get rid of this attraction without having the responsibilities, this union, this family, this structure, this family structure, etc. So here we have another purpose of this union, because out of this union will come the people who will populate the society. And these people who are populating the society, they need this cell in order to get the basic educations, to learn to live with each other, and to feel that they belong to this family. Because if you don't feel that you belong to a family, then you will not feel that you belong to the society. And if you don't feel that you belong to society, you will not help the society for social elevation, but you will go against it. So this is one other aspect of the marriage. But like I said, to respond to your question, I can't be comprehensive in just a few sentences. The second question, نساء ناقصات عقل ودين. My understanding of this hadith, and like I said, I wrote a joint paper with my wife on this, not only on the issue of the salat, but on this also. And how I understand it, and this understanding is not, I think, based on just khawatir, but it's a long analysis of the Quran and the Sunnah, and following up the Quran and the Sunnah, and seeing where in the Quran and the Sunnah Allah compares between human being and show and stretch the differences between human being and why he does this. And we made the list of why he did this, etc. So anyhow, just to tell you, and the outcome for me is that that the Prophet ﷺ was empowering women to tell them, watch out, you have a lack of intelligence, because this lack of intelligence is not something that they are born with. It's not something that is intrinsic to women, but it is something that it's due to society, because women were not, and because this the Prophet ﷺ related this to economics and financial questions. So the women were how do you say it, were excluded from society, and so the Prophet was empowered. And this exclusion made that they had less intelligence, because the Prophet was referring here especially to the intelligence of financial issues, because he talked about financial issues. So he was empowered them to do something about it. And the same thing for the prayer. They have less, they have a period where they don't pray, so they should try to get at a level, to the level. So like I said, I can't tell you the study what was developed, but this is an outcome, like I said, that is based on a long study. But for me, this is what the hadith means, is to empower women to do something about it, and not to just say this is your fatality and you just like this and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you want to perhaps touch upon the third point, or we don't have enough time? The ayah. This will take a lot of time? Okay. The papers, can we have access to them, or your papers? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Just maybe to answer very quickly on your question, looking at the asbab al-nuzul and looking at everything, you can come up, you have to, I think, have a comprehensive reading of the text, and not just this verse. You can find an authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says, لا تضربوهن. This is authentic hadith, don't hit them. So here, what is it? We have a contradiction, or what is then the meaning of أضربوهن? So I mean, all of these things should be taken into consideration. And if you look at Asbab al-Nuzul, this verse was not revealed to establish the prohibition of hitting women. No, the verse is related to an issue where a man hit his woman and she wanted qisas, and this ayah was just there to say, here, qisas is not of application. For me, this is what the ayah is saying. The qisas is not of application. You have to take into account, Asbab al-Nuzul, take into account what the Prophet says and how the Prophet did and how he dealt, etc. And then you will come up with a proper understanding, like I said. And for me, the ayah did not establish this rule, but ayah just is talking about the fact of that qisas here is not of application. And we have other, for example, there is a hadith who is saying, أنا بريء ممن أقام بين ظهراني المشركين. This hadith is taken, or the part of this hadith, while the Prophet ﷺ was talking about something totally different. He was talking about diya, and he is saying that those people doesn't deserve diya because they are living with non-Muslims, so I don't give him a diya. So it's something totally different, nothing to do with whether we are allowed to live with Muslims or not Muslims. So I mean, just we have to take into account this overall methodology in dealing with text.
Two more questions in brief, please. Directly to your question, please.
Yeah. So I have one question. It's a little bit in general. So it's regarding the reference. So during all the discussions, so you refer to the Madahib al-Arba'a. Okay. So what about the other schools, which are, for example, Mu'tazila, Ibadiyya? So are you in CILE? Are you really extending your research and then look at the other schools rather than just focusing on the fourth? That
may come this afternoon, because we will have an overall feedback about the summer school. So this maybe is more appropriate to this overall feedback than to this panel, I think.
Okay.
Is it you? I just have a short question, very short one. I have been asked this question: why are there are only, and we speak always about the 10 مبشرين بالجنة, and they are men. Those who are, I have been asked this question, and المبشرين بالجنة 10. Yes, that is what is, no, that is what is going on in
just a quick answer, like you said, a quick comment. This is not true, and there are a lot of mubashirin bil Jannah. It's not because there is a hadith who's citing 10 that there are not more. There are a lot of others that where the Prophet ﷺ promised them.
I have a quick question. Often when we speak about gender equity, we refer to النساء شقائق الرجال في الأحكام. النساء شقائق الرجال في الأحكام. Or maybe I missed the last one. الرجال. But does it apply to everything, especially if we talk about inheritance and testimony? I know Dr. Fathi will touch on this afternoon, but if we can briefly talk about this.
You can ask questions to Dr. Mawahib also.
I mean, it's to the panel.
Yes.
Both
Okay.
of you.
So the question of inheritance, I think I referred to it very briefly when comparing slavery and this question. And people who are taking slavery as, okay, now we changed the thing while Islam allowed it, so let's change inheritance while Islam. I told you how incoherent this approach is, and this is just a way to try to play around with the text. But here, this question is established by Islam, and we have to take this question in the overall frame in which it functions. And we have to make distinction also with the theory and the practice, with the fahm wa tanzil, and here we can see that this question is related to the whole way that the Islam is perceiving the family and the fact that the man has the financial responsibility. He is the one who will provide so everything in the household financially. He is the one who will pay the mahr. He is the one who will deal with all these financial issues, and he is the one even responsible not only in the household but outside the household of all the women that are related to him if they are in need for his help. So here Islam gave the half of the woman, but she can freely deal with her money without being responsible for anybody. Even if her man is poor, she is not obliged to give him any money. He has to work. If she don't want, he doesn't have to. Now coming to the reality, we can say, okay, today things have changed and woman is working, etc. So on the practical level and the tanzil, we can deal case by case and say, okay, this woman is deprived and she's not getting money from her relatives, etc. So we give her the same as the man. This is a fatwa that can be done, but it stays an exception, and the exception never becomes the rule. The tanzil is an ijtihad, and it can be an exception, but it can never become the rule. And the purpose, there's a maqsad behind all of this Islamic perception, is that the woman is not obliged to work. If she wants to work, she works, and if she doesn't want, she doesn't work. But saying that, okay, now things have changed, so then we oblige women to work also, and this is against the purpose of Islam, to oblige women to work. The man is obliged, not the woman. So what should we change here, the principle or the reality? The Islamic principles came to change the reality, and we should not change the principles for the reality. We can change the principles in application, but this stays an exception, and the reality cannot become the rule and change the text.
Any other questions? Dr. Fadal.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Dr. Mawahib, Sheikh Chauki. Very nice and enlightening presentations. I have a very quick remark. Number one, I think the whole issue of gender, in my view, should be taken by the context of equity more than context of principle of equity more than principle of equality. And Islam is a religion of justice, and equality is a means. Equality is a means to achieve equity. which is justice. Yes, most of the time you achieve equity through equality, but not all the times, because there are some different circumstances. People with different responsibilities might have different rights, etc. So I think that should be taken into account. Number two, I think we have this challenge of these traditional or tyrannical, patriarchal culture that we have in Muslim countries, but we have also the challenge of very permissive culture in Western countries that is almost breaking the borders between human life and animal life. And as I said before, that I like the words of Albert Camus, who said that the human is the only animal who refuses to be an animal. So I think we have to keep refusing to be an animal and not to go too far in that permissive way. And that will be great contribution actually for Muslim communities in these postmodern societies that to revive some rigidity about humanity of a human. Something that might help to that is to look at gender difference as another aspect of legitimate diversity. We are defending diversity everywhere, respect of diversity in race, in culture, in religion. I think we need also to respect diversity in gender. Why not? It's just another aspect of diversity. And something that helped in that is what Dr. Mawahib talked about in taking local context into account as a site for knowledge production. The challenge for gender challenge in Muslim majority countries is not the same as gender challenge in a democratic Western country, for example. As for, yes, I think Chauki made very, very good points. One of them is this lost potentialities. I think there's the idea of iqbal of lost potentialities in politics might also apply to many aspects of our social life and social history. So we need to do some actualization of that lost potential. But when you said that preference, it's not preference, but it's favor, that's problematic, especially in English. The word favoritism is not positive. So I don't think that Allah is applying favoritism. No. But if you say he's giving favor to male and favor to female, but they are different favors, yes, but it's not giving favor to one side only, because there is no favoritism. Allah Azza wa Jalla is fair judge.
It maybe has to do with my English, but al-fadl, هذا فضل من Allah. How would you translate it in English?
Well, fadl usually translated bounty.
Bounty?
Yeah, but the problem is favoritism now in ethics, as a term. Favoritism is very negative term. The sister asked about وَضْرِبُهُنَّ. These words I said is translated usually that you can beat up, women. I think there is a very interesting interpretation by Mohamed that need to be taken into account. Mohamed rahmatullah alayhi, whose grave is here in Granada, in the cemetery here in Granada, and we're looking for someone to take me there to visit him, if someone can help. Ahmed Asad, in his translation of Quran, actually, and his commentary and the message of Quran, he believes that the verb idrib here is derived from dirab and not from darb. And what means, basically it means, yes, have that kind of separation in the bed, and then if that didn't work, go back to normal physical life. Yes, I don't know of any other scholar who said it before, but still it's acceptable within the language, and more important, it's acceptable by the general principles. Marriage is a voluntary contract, and in voluntary contract, you cannot be plaintiff and judge at the same time. I mean, if you have difference with your wife, you cannot apply the law. No, go to the court, complain about your wife, or she go to the court and complain about you. But none of them can be both, plaintiff, defendant, and judge at the same time. And there is authentic hadith, plus the hadith that Sheikh Chauki mentioned, that Prophet ﷺ, cursed Al-Walid ibn Uqba because he was beating his wife. The Prophet sent him, don't do it. He didn't tell him, do you have the right to do it? What happened? No, just don't do it when she came complaining. And she came back said, I told him, but he beats me up more. And Prophet ﷺ said, take my turban, show it to him as evidence that you're coming from here, and tell him that I told him to stop. She came back said, he still continued doing it. Prophet ﷺ, Allahumma alayka bil walid, فإنه أثم بي مرتين. I mean, oh Allah, punish Al-Walid because he's disobeying me twice. So why Prophet ﷺ is preventing this man from exercising what some scholars believe is right? No, it's not right. So I think that need to be taken into account. Thank you very much. Sorry for being too long.
We have only 2 minutes, and I think it's better to have all the questions in the afternoon, inshallah, and then break to just to be on time for the prayers. Thank you. Thank you so much.